The colony of Ardent 9 had once been full of life. Its sky was bright, its markets were full, and ships came and went every hour. People from many species worked together there, building a peaceful world on the edge of the galaxy. But now everything was silent. The streets were empty, the lights were dim, and the once beautiful city stood in smoke and dust. 6 months had passed since the siege began, and hope was slipping away like sand through fingers. The enemy was the Karath Dominion, a cruel and expanding force that saw weakness as a call to attack. They came with fleets of black ships that blotted out the stars, firing without mercy on every defense post they found. The people of Ardent 9 had called for help again and again, but the Galactic Council never replied. Some said the Council had given up on the frontier worlds, that they no longer cared for those who lived so far away. Others whispered a more painful thought. Maybe help was never coming at all. Inside a half-broken command tower, Commander Yira Keth looked at the faint lights on her monitor. Every blinking signal was a defense point, and every few minutes one went dark forever. She didn't flinch anymore when it happened. She just noted the loss and kept working. Her armor was scratched, her eyes tired, but she refused to leave her post. The people below needed her to stay calm. Her second officer, a young technician, came to her with shaking hands. "Commander, we've sent 23 messages in the last week. No answer." Yira nodded slowly. "Then we send the 24th. We keep sending until someone listens." But deep down, she knew the truth. No one was listening anymore. The Galactic Council had other wars, other problems. Ardent 9 was small and far. It was easier to forget it existed. Outside, in orbit, a few defense satellites still worked, though their weapons were weak and their systems old. The orbital ring, called Vigil's Halo, circled the planet like a ghost of what it once was. It had once been filled with trade ships and travelers, but now it was a fortress. Most of its decks were empty, and the rest were filled with refugees, families hiding from the endless bombardments. Food was running out. Medical supplies were almost gone. The last cargo ship had been destroyed trying to escape through the enemy blockade. The only thing keeping everyone alive was the will to survive, though even that was fading. Commander Yira stood by the wide viewing window, watching the dark horizon of space. Somewhere beyond those stars, she imagined there must be someone who still cared, someone who might come. She remembered old stories told by travelers long ago, about a race of beings who once stood up for those who couldn't defend themselves. They were called humans. No one had seen them for generations. Some believed they had vanished after a great war. Some said they went beyond the galactic rim, never to return. When Yira was a child, her grandfather told her tales of human courage. He said they were strange creatures, fragile in body but unbreakable in spirit. They fought not just for power but for justice. But those were old legends, and legends do not stop plasma fire. Still, on nights like this, when the stars looked quiet and far, she found herself whispering those names again, as if saying them could make them real. Maybe they were just stories. Her technician said quietly, watching her reflection in the glass. "Maybe," she replied. "But sometimes stories are all we have left." A low alarm echoed through the control room. Another district on the surface had fallen. The Karath were advancing fast now, sending dropships full of soldiers to capture the last cities. Every communication relay that tried to send distress signals was being jammed. The enemies were making sure no one could cry for help. Still, Yira kept her post. She refused to give the Karath the satisfaction of seeing Ardent 9 surrender. If this was to be their last stand, it would be one remembered with dignity. She ordered the defense grid to focus all remaining power into the shield generators around the capital zone. The energy fields flickered weakly, but they held. Night on Ardent 9 no longer brought peace. It brought the glow of bombardment across the horizon, the hum of ships in low orbit, and the endless noise of sirens. Children no longer slept. Adults spoke in whispers as if their voices alone could draw enemy fire. Every hour felt longer than the last. Yira recorded a message that night. She spoke into the small recorder on her desk, her voice steady but low. "To whoever finds this," she began. "We fought as long as we could. We asked for help, but no one came. If this message reaches anyone, remember the people of Ardent 9. Remember that we did not surrender. We stood together until the end." She paused before turning off the recorder. For a brief second, she looked up at the stars and whispered, "If there are humans out there, please hear us." The words were sent through the last working beacon. The signal was weak, scattered, and uncertain. It left the planet like a lost bird flying into the endless dark. No one expected it to reach anywhere. But in the vast silence of space, sometimes even the smallest voice can travel farther than anyone believes. For now, all that could be done was to wait. The defenders of Ardent 9 checked their weapons and patched their armor again. They spoke quietly among themselves, telling small jokes to stay sane. Each of them carried the same question inside. How much longer can we last? Outside the window, the stars shimmered coldly. Somewhere in that endless void, something ancient might have stirred, but no one on the planet could know. For them, all that remained was duty, faith, and the fading hope that maybe, just maybe, someone still remembered what it meant to stand beside the helpless. Yura didn't sleep that night. She stayed by the console, her hand resting near the transmitter, watching the small green light blink with every pulse of the outgoing signal. It was her heartbeat now, the last rhythm of a dying world. She didn't know that far away. Across forgotten star routes, something had heard her call. But for now, she simply sat in silence, waiting for a miracle she no longer believed could come. The cold light from the control room flickered again as power dipped across the station. Commander Yura's reflection flashed for a moment in the glass wall before vanishing into shadow. She could hear the low hum of the remaining generators struggling to keep everything alive. Every few seconds, the sound of distant explosions rolled through the thin metal walls, a reminder that the fight was still going on below. The technician from before sat near the console, tapping a sequence again and again, trying to boost the range of their last signal. His eyes were red from no sleep. "It's no use," he whispered. "We've sent the same message 100 times. There's no one left to hear it." Yura didn't reply. She had learned long ago that hope was not made from logic. It was made from the need to believe that someone cared. She leaned closer to the console and spoke softly. "Send it again." The signal went out through the dark once more, a tiny echo bouncing through broken satellites and shattered debris. In space, nothing moves fast except light and death, but sometimes even the smallest thing can reach the most unexpected place. Far beyond the edges of known space, beyond the maps of the Galactic Council, a long-forgotten satellite stirred. It was covered in dust and ice, silent for ages. But when Yura's message passed through, its old systems woke for one brief moment. A flicker of green lit up deep inside the machine, and then the signal bounced again, this time toward a sector no one had visited in hundreds of years. No one on Ardent 9 knew that their cry had just reached something sleeping in the dark. Back on the station, the defenders prepared for another wave. The Karath ships were regrouping in orbit. Their engines burned like red eyes across the night sky. Yura watched the display on her screen as enemy cruisers began to move closer, cutting off escape routes. She knew what it meant. The next assault would finish them. "Commander," the technician said quietly, "should we start the evacuation protocol?" "There is nowhere left to evacuate," she said. "We stay and hold the line as long as we can." She looked at the small holographic picture on her desk. It showed the surface city of Halvan before the war, children playing near the sea, smiling faces, calm skies. She closed her eyes for a moment. "We'll hold," she whispered, as if to the people in that picture. On the other side of the galaxy, in the shadow of a dying star, something enormous drifted. It was a ship, old and silent, coated in the dust of centuries. Its metal hull was marked by age, its engines quiet, its lights off. But deep inside its heart, a faint signal began to blink. The ship's core computer, called Argus, woke slowly. Its sensors scanned the incoming message. It recognized the pattern immediately. Sigma 9 Terran Military Distress Code. Argus ran a system check. The results were clear. 172 crew in cryogenic sleep. Systems functional at 68%. Weapons operational. Engines dormant. Orders last received. Stand by for Allied distress call. Argus processed for exactly 3 seconds before activating the awakening sequence. The great ship began to hum with power again, lights flickering to life along its corridors. In the cryo chamber, rows of frozen crew members slept inside glass pods. One by one, the lids lifted, releasing thin clouds of vapor. A woman in uniform opened her eyes first. Her breath fogged the glass before the lid lifted completely. She sat up slowly, her body weak but her mind sharp. The room around her was quiet except for the sound of hissing gas and faint beeps. A voice came from the ship's intercom, calm and steady. "Captain Ward, distress signal received. Coordinates locked. Allied colony under siege, minimal time remaining. The captain closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. How long have we slept? She asked. 321 years, Argus replied. Her expression did not change. She simply nodded. Then it's time to move. She stepped onto the command bridge, her boots echoing against the floor. The view outside the window showed nothing but endless stars. Argus, give me full report. Engines online. Weapon systems at 70%. Life support stable. Cryobays releasing remaining command crew now. Shall I prepare jump sequence? Yes, she said quietly. Plot course for the coordinates from the distress call. The great ship, the human expeditionary vessel HSS Resolute, began to awaken fully. Power rippled across its massive hull as ancient engines roared back to life. For centuries it had waited in silence, carrying the last living humans beyond the known worlds, watching and waiting for the signal it had been built to answer. In the engine chamber, blue plasma began to surge. The light of rebirth filled the dark corridors as systems reconnected and shields came online. On the bridge, Captain Ward looked at the holographic map. The signal from Ardent 9 blinked faintly at the edge of the display. We're coming, she said softly. Back on Ardent 9, Yira and her crew didn't know that their message had found a listener. They only saw the enemy fleet tightening its grip. The Karath command ship moved into position directly above the capital city. Thousands of enemy soldiers were preparing to land. Yira stood before her team, trying to keep her voice strong. This is our home. If they take the sky, they take everything. We hold this station no matter what. The crew cheered weakly, but their faces showed fear. Many of them had not eaten a real meal in days. They had seen too much death, but her words gave them something to hold on to. Sometimes leadership was not about orders. It was about giving people a reason to keep standing. Night fell again on the planet below. Fires burned across the surface like orange rivers. The stars looked colder than ever. Yira walked alone through the quiet corridor of the station, passing by sleeping refugees huddled together under blankets. She stopped to cover a small child who had fallen asleep near the wall, then looked out at the stars once more. In that same moment, the HSS Resolute crossed the first hyperspace gate in centuries. The jump tore open a corridor of blue light, and the ship vanished from its resting place. The stars stretched and twisted as it raced across impossible distances. Every part of the ship groaned with ancient power, but it held. Estimated arrival time, 42 hours, Argus announced. Keep us on course, Captain Ward replied. Send readiness signal to all decks. The ship's engines thundered across the void. Back on the station, the final defensive line was being overrun. Communications failed one by one as the Karath bombardment began again. Explosions shook the corridors. Yira ran through the smoke, shouting commands to her team. Sparks flew from the ceiling. The sound of metal tearing filled the air. We can't hold much longer, the technician yelled, grabbing onto a railing as another blast hit. Divert all power to shields, she shouted back. We buy time until the last second. No one on that station knew that far away a forgotten human warship was coming through the dark faster than light. They only knew that they were alone, or so they thought. Yira returned to the command deck and looked at the black sky one last time. Her hand rested on the cracked glass. She whispered to herself again, the same quiet words she had said before. If anyone can hear us, please come. Her voice was lost in the noise of battle. But far beyond the stars, a signal light blinked inside the human ship, steady and bright. The message had been received and humanity was no longer sleeping. The days after the last transmission were long and heavy. The defenders of Ardent 9 waited in silence, watching the empty sky that had brought them nothing but darkness for so long. Their communications were shattered, their ships gone, their strength nearly finished. The stars above looked cold, like distant eyes that had turned away. The enemy, the Karath, had pulled back for now. But everyone knew they would return. They always did. Their fleet moved like a tide, retreating only to gather again with greater force. For the survivors on Ardent 9, hope was fading like smoke in the wind. Inside the command station, Commander Yira sat beside the old radar console. The room was dim, the air thick with the smell of burnt circuits. Around her, the last few technicians worked quietly, checking signals, patching broken systems, and pretending not to see the hopelessness in each other's eyes. Power reserves are dropping, one of them said softly. If the next wave hits before we can repair the shields, the city won't survive. Yura said nothing. She knew it was true. The planet had no fleet, no reinforcements, no allies left. They had sent messages into the void for months begging for help, but no one had answered. The galactic powers had already written them off as lost. And yet she couldn't stop looking at the stars. Something deep inside her refused to let go. Every night when the others slept, she would go to the upper deck alone and stare into space. Sometimes she thought she saw a faint glimmer far beyond the system. Not a star, but something else. A strange rhythmic light. It blinked once every few seconds like a heartbeat. She told herself it was just a trick of her tired eyes. But still, she watched. Down in the city, life continued in quiet desperation. Families huddled together in the shelters. Soldiers patrolled the streets, their faces hollow but determined. Children drew pictures on the walls. Suns, ships, and what they imagined heroes looked like. No one spoke of victory anymore. Survival itself had become a kind of miracle. One evening, while inspecting the outer sensor tower, Yura received a faint signal, a repeating tone, low and distant, but steady. She froze, listening closely. It wasn't Karath code. It wasn't any known frequency. It pulsed slowly like a living thing. "Bring this up on the main screen," she ordered. The technician scrambled to connect the signal to the central console. The sound echoed through the room and on a soft, rhythmic pulse. It didn't sound like a message at first, but then, after a few cycles, the tone changed. It became a sequence, a pattern. "It's a distress acknowledgement," someone whispered. An old Earth pattern. The words struck through the silence like lightning. Earth. The name alone made the room go still. It was a word spoken only in stories, tales told by old soldiers around fading campfires. A world that had once stood at the center of the galaxy's courage. But Earth had been gone for centuries, sealed away behind broken gates, its fleets vanished into the dark. "Are you sure?" Yura asked quietly. The technician checked again. "The pattern matches. It's human." For a long moment no one spoke. Then Yura straightened and said, "Send our coordinates. Use the emergency beacon. Code every relay still alive. If someone out there is listening, let them know we're not dead yet." The technician hesitated. "Even if they are human, Commander. What if they can't come?" Yura's voice was steady. "Then at least they'll know we tried." The message went out. It traveled across dead space, through broken satellites and silent gates, bouncing weakly from one system to another. No one expected a reply. But somewhere, far beyond the rim of known space, in a quiet stretch of darkness where no stars shone, something ancient stirred, deep within the void. An old Terran warship lay sleeping, a relic from a forgotten age drifting in endless silence. Its hull was scarred, its systems dormant, its crew locked in cryostasis. But when the signal reached it, that faint, desperate call for help, a single light on its bridge flickered to life. "Signal detected," said a calm voice inside the ship's core. "Source Ardent 9 distress priority. Confirm activation." One by one systems came online. Engines hummed. Power surged through the corridors. The ship's name glowed faintly on its side. HSS Resolute. Inside the cryo chamber, the pods hissed open. A human captain awoke, her breath sharp in the cold air. Around her, the crew began to stir, disoriented but alive. They had been asleep for centuries, waiting for this very moment. "Status," she said softly. "Signal received," the ship's AI replied. "Coordinates locked. Ardent 9 under siege. Request for assistance acknowledged." The captain stood in silence, looking out through the frost-covered window at the distant stars. Then she whispered, "Prepare for jump." Back on Ardent 9, days passed with no response. The Karath fleet returned, larger this time, their ships spreading across the edge of the system like dark wings. The alarm sounded across the planet. People ran for cover. The defense batteries charged their last remaining cells. In the command center, Yura gripped the railing as the screens lit up with enemy signatures. There were too many, 10 times more than before. "This is it," said one of the soldiers beside her. "They're going to finish us." Yura didn't answer. She just looked at the radar, the same old empty sky. The first blast struck the outer defense ring. The planet shook. Alarms blared. The people below screamed as power grids failed and lights went dark. The second wave came moments later, cutting through the orbital stations like paper, and then, for a moment, everything went silent. The Karath ships stopped firing. Their formation shifted. The lead cruiser suddenly pulled back. Confusion spread across their fleet. "Commander," said the technician, his voice trembling. "Something's coming through the jump gate." Yira looked up sharply. "Enemy reinforcements?" He shook his head. "No, ma'am. It's something else." The radar flared white. The signal was enormous, unlike anything their scanners had ever registered. The technicians scrambled to adjust the feed. A wave of static filled the room, then cleared, and there, out of the black, came a shape. It moved slowly, emerging from the shadows of deep space. Massive, silent, surrounded by a faint blue glow. It wasn't sleek or elegant like modern ships. It was raw, old, and terrifyingly strong, built for war. Every alarm fell silent. Every eye turned to the viewing screen. As the ship broke through the edge of the atmosphere, a transmission came through. Clear, powerful, and unmistakably human. "This is the Terran warship Resolute. To the people of Ardent 9, hold fast. You are not alone." The entire room froze. Some people gasped. Others wept openly. Ira just stood there, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Outside, the human warship began to move. Its engines thundered like the roar of a storm. The Karath fleet turned to meet it, but it was already too late. Blue light erupted from its cannons, cutting through the darkness like lightning. In a single volley, 3 enemy cruisers were torn apart. The rest scattered, breaking formation, firing wildly. But the human ship didn't slow. It moved with purpose, every strike clean, every maneuver perfect. From the surface, people watched as the sky turned into a blazing storm of light. The sound reached them seconds later. A deep rumble that shook the air. A sound like the heartbeat of the universe itself. For the first time in months, the people of Ardent 9 felt something they had forgotten. Hope. The technician whispered. They came. The humans came. Yira stood straight, tears in her eyes, and said quietly, "Then we fight beside them." And above them, in the burning sky, the warship of Earth moved like a living legend, a ghost from humanity's past, come back to remind the galaxy what it meant to never abandon your own. The night sky over Ardent 9 looked strange that evening. The stars were hidden behind smoke, and the horizon glowed a dull red from the constant bombardments. The air was full of static and ash. Commander Yira stood at the observation deck, her hands resting on the railing, watching the faint flashes in orbit as her few remaining defense drones tried to hold the line. Every explosion felt closer. Every minute felt like the last. Her technician, tired and pale, came to her side. "Commander," he said softly, "the outer shield grid is gone. The enemy ships are preparing to enter the atmosphere." Yira didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the darkness above. "How long before they reach the surface?" "An hour. Maybe less." "Then we use that hour," she replied quietly. "Every second we buy means one more family has a chance to hide." She turned and looked around the control room. Most of the lights had failed. Only a few displays still worked, blinking weakly in the dim air. The sound of distant alarms came and went like a heartbeat. Yira could hear the fear in her people's breathing. She wanted to tell them that help was coming, but she couldn't lie to them anymore. The Karath fleet hung like a black storm in orbit, hundreds of ships surrounding the world. Their engines pulsed like red suns, ready to burn everything below. The Galactic Council had stayed silent for too long. The defenders had sent every code, every plea, but the channels remained empty. For most of them, this was the end. And then the silence changed. A faint tremor ran through the command station. The screens flickered. At first, Yira thought it was another hit, but then the readings began to spike in a strange way. It wasn't a weapon impact. It was something different. "Commander, there's a sudden distortion in deep orbit," the technician said, his voice unsteady. "Energy surge detected." "Hyperspace interference," Yira frowned. "From where?" "Unknown. It's not Karath technology." The defenders looked up at the main monitor. In the dark void beyond the planet, a ripple spread across the stars like water disturbed by a drop of light. The stars bent for a second, and then something massive began to appear. It tore its way out of hyperspace like a shadow breaking through glass. The enemy fleet froze. Their scanners went wild, unable to identify the newcomer. The energy signature was ancient yet powerful, something not recorded in any galactic database for hundreds of years. As the distortion faded, a single warship came into view. It was enormous, dark silver with faint blue lines pulsing across its hull. Its engines glowed like the heart of a storm. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even Yira forgot to breathe. "Commander," the technician whispered. What is that?" The ship's signal cut through the noise of every frequency in the system. The voice that came was calm, firm, and unmistakably human. "This is the Terran vessel Resolute. To all hostile forces orbiting Ardent 9, cease fire immediately or face destruction." The sound of that voice made the entire control room go silent. People looked at one another, hardly believing what they'd heard. "The humans," someone whispered. "It's real." The Karath commander's response came seconds later, his tone mocking and confident. "Unknown vessel, this is Karath Dominion Command. You are entering restricted territory. Withdraw or be destroyed." But the humans did not answer. Instead, the Resolute moved. It was not fast in the way most ships were fast. It moved like thunder rolling through the night. Its engines flared, and space itself seemed to bend around it. The Karath opened fire immediately. Beams of red plasma streaked through the void, slamming toward the human ship. Every blast struck its shields and vanished into blue light. Then the warship replied. A single rail cannon fired, the soundless flash of its shot crossing the distance in an instant. The Karath destroyer that had led the attack split apart. Its hull shredded like paper. Another blast followed, then another. In seconds, 3 warships vanished from the sky. Inside the command room on Ardent 9, the defenders stared in disbelief. None of their sensors could track the speed of the human weapon fire. Every time the Resolute fired, an enemy ship simply disappeared. The Karath tried to regroup. Their commanders shouted orders. Smaller ships spread out, launching missile swarms. The missiles never reached their target. The Resolute's countermeasures cut them down mid-flight, filling the void with silent flashes of light. Then the human ship began deploying something no one had ever seen before. From its sides, dark pods launched outward, opening into hundreds of autonomous drones. Each drone moved with precision, forming perfect patterns around the main ship. They moved like a single mind, cutting through the enemy fleet with sharp bursts of blue energy. Within minutes, the sky above Ardent 9 turned into a dance of light and fire. The Karath ships were breaking apart, their formations collapsing, their communications jammed. They tried to flee, but the humans had already locked them in. Commander Yira stood frozen, watching the screen as the impossible unfolded. Her people cheered and cried at the same time. Some laughed through tears. They had no words. The technician shouted, "Commander, the humans are sending us a transmission." The signal came through clearly. The same calm human voice spoke again. "Ardent 9 Defense Command, this is the Terran vessel Resolute. We received your distress call. Hold your positions. You are safe now." Yira could hardly speak. She managed to say, "This is Commander Yira Keth of the Ardent 9 Defense. We thought no one would come." The voice answered, "We never leave those who call for help." Outside, the human ship continued its attack, clearing the orbit in silence and precision. Every strike was clean, every movement exact. The Karath ships began retreating into deep space, leaving behind wreckage and flames. The sky, once filled with enemy fire, now glowed with the calm blue light of the Resolute's engines. The noise of battle faded slowly until there was only quiet again. For the first time in months, Yira stood in silence that was not made of fear. She looked up at the stars, and for a moment, they looked bright again. She whispered to herself, "They came." The people of Ardent 9 gathered across the damaged cities, watching the giant ship move slowly across the sky. To them, it looked like a guardian out of legend, something that did not belong to their time. Yet it was real. On board the Resolute, the human crew worked with calm focus. The captain gave quiet orders. "Deploy med drones to the surface. Scan for survivors. Begin humanitarian drop sequence." Cargo bays opened, releasing pods filled with supplies, medicine, and communication beacons. They fell gently through the atmosphere, landing near the surviving settlements. The technician on Ardent 9 turned to Yira, still shaking his head. "Commander, I didn't think they were real. Humans. I thought they were just stories." Yira smiled faintly. "So did I. But it seems legends have long memories." As the human ship drifted above the world it had just saved, its lights reflecting across the clouds, something changed in the hearts of those who saw it. For months they had lived in fear, waiting for the end, Now they saw hope not as a story or a dream, but as something alive, something real. The people began to step out from shelters and bunkers looking up. Some waved toward the sky. Some knelt and prayed. All of them cried. In the command station, Yira watched in silence, her eyes wet but her posture firm. "Send a planet-wide message," she said softly. "Tell everyone." The humans came. The signal spread across Ardent 9, carried by every working relay and comm tower. Across broken cities and empty skies, one message echoed again and again. They thought no help was coming, but a human warship came thundering from the void. The world had been saved by the ones it had almost forgotten, and somewhere in the heart of the galaxy, that truth began to travel, spreading like fire through the stars, waking old memories and reminding everyone that humanity might disappear for a time, but it never abandons those who cry for help. The sky over Ardent 9 was still glowing from the battle. The wreckage of the Karath fleet drifted silently in orbit, pieces of metal and debris shining like small stars. The once invincible enemy was gone, their ships either destroyed or running into deep space. The air was quiet now, and for the first time in months the people on the surface could look up without fear. In the control room of Vigil's Halo, Commander Yira stood before the wide viewing window. Her face was streaked with ash, her uniform torn, but her eyes were alive. The screens behind her showed readings she had not seen since the war began. Oxygen stable. Communications restored. No enemy signals detected. She could hardly believe it. The technician beside her sat with his hands over his mouth, staring at the radar display that now showed only one ship in orbit, the Terran warship, HSS Resolute. Its outline filled the screen, majestic and calm, its hull shining with faint blue lights. The human voice came again through the speaker, steady and clear. "This is Captain Ward of the Terran vessel Resolute. Ardent 9 is secure. We are beginning supply drops and medical deployment," the technician whispered. "They really came?" Yira nodded slowly. "And they didn't just come. They won." Across the planet, small cargo pods from the Resolute fell gently through the atmosphere. Each pod carried food, medicine, power cells, and emergency beacons. Some even carried small drones that began clearing debris and repairing communication lines. For the people below, it felt like a dream. After months of hunger and fear, suddenly there was help, real help. In the refugee camps, children ran out from shelters to see the glowing pods landing in the open fields. They had never seen ships like these before. Some waved toward the sky, while others picked up the food packs that dropped beside them. The older ones cried quietly. Inside the command room, Yira received another transmission. The image flickered, and for the first time she saw the human captain on screen. The face was calm but strong, with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of years. "Commander Yira of Ardent 9, the captain said, "your signal reached us through ancient relays. We were in deep cryodrift, waiting for a distress call from any allied world. We came as soon as we received it." Yira tried to find words. "You came through the void, across hundreds of light years just for us?" The captain nodded. "That's what humans do. We answer the call." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy but full of meaning. It was the silence of understanding, the kind that didn't need more words. Later that day, rescue drones from the human ship began scanning the surface for survivors. Medical teams, guided remotely from the Resolute, started delivering treatments to the wounded. The humans worked efficiently, their technology far more advanced than anything Ardent 9 had ever seen. But what amazed everyone most was not their power. It was their kindness. The drones didn't just fix machines. They helped people. They carried the weak, fed the hungry, and even projected messages of comfort in different alien languages. They moved with quiet precision without pride or demand. It was as if helping others was written into their very design. Yira watched one of the broadcasts being played on the station screens. A soft human voice said, "To the people of Ardent 9, you are not alone. We are here with you. You fought bravely. Now you will live." The technician smiled faintly. "They talk like they mean it." "They do," Yira said softly. "They always did if the old stories were true." Outside, the planet began to change. Fire slowly faded. The smoke lifted. The people started to rebuild. From the wreckage, small groups began forming again. Engineers repairing power grids, doctors treating the injured, and families finding each other after long separations. Everywhere, People looked up at the human ship as if it were a sun that had returned after a long winter. Meanwhile, in orbit, the crew of the Resolute was still working. The bridge was full of activity. Officers monitored the atmosphere and rescue operations. The captain stood quietly near the main window, looking down at the blue-green planet below. Her second officer approached. "Ma'am, we've cleared most of the debris field. No Karath ships remain in system." The captain nodded. "Good. Send a warning to their command network. If they return, we will be waiting." She paused for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Log the mission in the archive. Mark it as Operation Dawn." Back on the surface, Yira gathered her team for the first calm briefing since the siege began. Her voice was steady but warm. "We survived because we refused to give up. But we were saved because someone remembered us. Let that never be forgotten." The technician asked, "Do you think the humans will stay?" She looked toward the sky again. "Maybe not forever. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that they came when we needed them most." That night, a quiet celebration spread across the colony. Not a loud one. They were too tired for that. It was peaceful. People shared food again. They lit lamps in their homes. For the first time in half a year, laughter was heard in the streets. Yira sat near the viewing window of the station holding a cup of warm ration drink. She watched the light of the Resolute reflect off the surface of the sea below. It was hard to believe that something that powerful could come out of the darkness for no reason other than to help. She thought of what her grandfather once said. Humans fight not because they must, but because someone needs them to. And she realized now that those old words had always been true. On the bridge of the human ship, the captain looked over the reports. The crew had saved thousands of lives. Repairs were underway across the colony. The captain spoke quietly, almost to herself. "We slept for centuries waiting for a call, and when it came, it was from those who never stopped believing in us." Argus, the ship's AI, replied in its calm tone. "Mission successful. Shall I record final log entry?" "Yes," the captain said. "Record this. Humanity has returned to the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians. We remember what it means to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The AI confirmed the entry. The captain took a deep breath and looked one last time at Ardent 9. She knew they would soon leave, back into the quiet stretch of the galaxy, waiting for the next voice that called for help. On the planet below, Yira stood outside the command center, surrounded by the survivors. They watched as the human ship began to rise higher into the sky. The engines glowed softly, not in fury, but in peace. Slowly, the great ship turned, aligning itself toward the distant stars. A final message came through every speaker on the planet. "To the people of Ardent 9, humanity hears you. Stand strong, rebuild, we will always be watching." The people stood silent, some crying, some smiling. As the warship disappeared into the void, its blue trail cutting across the heavens, Yira whispered, "Thank you." The technician beside her looked up and said, "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" Yira smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but someone else will, and when they do, they'll know help is never too far away." The night sky was quiet again. The stars shone brighter than they had in months. The fires had gone out. In their place was a deep peace, the kind that comes only after surviving something impossible. From that day on, the people of Ardent 9 kept a small light burning at the highest point of their city. It wasn't a beacon for ships. It was a reminder, a promise. That light told every traveler who passed their world one simple truth. They thought no help was coming. But then a human warship came thundering from the void, and when it did, the galaxy remembered what humanity truly was. Weeks passed after the human warship vanished into the dark sky. Ardent 9 had survived, but now came the harder task, rebuilding what was lost. The people were exhausted, but their hearts carried something new, hope. Commander Yira woke every morning before dawn and walked to the edge of the old observatory. From there, she could see the city slowly returning to life. Buildings once shattered by enemy fire now stood again, patched and alive with light. The fields beyond the hills had started growing crops once more. The laughter of children echoed faintly from the repaired shelters. Everywhere she went, people greeted her with quiet pride. They worked harder now, not out of duty but out of gratitude. They had seen what it meant to be remembered. Near the center of the colony stood the beacon, a tall tower of steel and glass built from the wreckage of destroyed ships. At the top of it burned a single blue light, a tribute to the humans who had come through the void to save them. That light never went out. Each night, as the stars filled the sky, people would stop and look at it. Some whispered prayers, others simply smiled. It reminded them that no matter how dark things became, someone, somewhere, would come when needed most. But even in peace, questions remained. Who were those humans really? How had they survived all these centuries in silence? Why had they come for Ardent 9 and no other world? The galaxy began to talk again. News spread quickly. The story of the human warship that came roaring out of the void. Some called it a legend. Others said it was a ghost from a forgotten war. But for those who had seen it with their own eyes, there was no doubt. The humans were real. And they were watching. Months later, in the restored control room of Vigil's Halo, Yura received a new transmission. The signal was faint, as if traveling from a great distance. The voice was human, calm, and familiar. "This is the Terran vessel Resolute," it said. "To any survivors of Ardent 9, your recovery has been noted. The Council acknowledges your courage. Maintain your beacon. Help will come again when it is needed." Yura stood frozen, listening to the words. The sound was not live. It was recorded, a message left for them. But it carried warmth, the kind that only humans could give. She saved the message into the archives, labeling it Echo of Dawn. The technician beside her smiled softly. "They didn't forget us." "No," she said. "They never do." Beyond Ardent 9, other colonies began to report strange signals. Emergency beacons that had gone silent for centuries were suddenly receiving responses. Faint blue lights appeared in the skies of forgotten worlds, marking the path of unseen warships. Everywhere those lights appeared, destruction stopped. It wasn't war that followed them. It was peace. The Karath, the once feared empire, had gone silent after their defeat at Ardent 9. Their fleets were scattered, their leaders vanished. Rumors said they had fled to the dark edge of the galaxy, terrified of facing the same humans who had crushed their strongest armada in a single day. In one recorded council meeting months later, a senior alien diplomat spoke trembling words. "If they awaken fully, none of us are ready. Pray they remain asleep until we learn their ways." But humanity wasn't sleeping anymore. They were awake and they remembered. On Ardent 9, life was slowly returning to normal. The colony rebuilt its schools and homes. Children learned about the ancient species that once ruled the stars. And among those stories, they learned of humans, the mysterious race that had vanished from history but returned when the galaxy needed them most. Teachers told their students, "The humans are not gods. They are not myths. They are like us, only stronger in spirit. They protect, they rebuild, and they never abandon those who ask for help." The children grew up with that belief. That humanity, wherever it was, stood as the silent guardian between light and darkness. Years later, Yura stood once again by the observatory. Her hair had turned silver, but her eyes were still sharp. She watched the stars, wondering if the human ship was still out there, somewhere beyond the reach of scanners. Her people had grown. The colony was thriving again. Trade routes reopened, and other planets reached out to form alliances. And at the heart of every alliance, one name was spoken with quiet reverence and humanity. Every year, on the day the war ended, the people gathered at the beacon. They lit blue lanterns that floated into the sky, thousands of them, each one a symbol of thanks. Yura would stand before the crowd and speak the same words every year. They came when all seemed lost. They came not for power, not for glory, but because we called for help. That is who they are. And that is what we must become for others. Her voice always carried softly through the air. And when she finished, the lanterns drifted upward, glowing against the night like small stars, and sometimes, on nights when the wind was still and the stars were bright, a faint hum filled the sky. A deep, powerful sound that rolled across the horizon for just a few seconds before fading. When that happened, people would look at one another and smile. "They're still out there," they would say, "watching us." Far beyond the rim of known space, the HSS Resolute traveled through the void. Its engines pulsed quietly, its hull dark and scarred from countless missions. Inside, the crew moved with calm purpose. Captain Ward sat in her chair, reading through new distress signals from distant worlds. Each message told a story. A planet under siege, a station running out of oxygen, a colony cut off from aid. "Which one first?" her officer asked. The captain looked up, her eyes steady. All of them. One at a time, the officer nodded. You think they'll ever know who we really are? The captain smiled faintly. Maybe, but it's not about that. It's about making sure they never face what we once did. As long as someone remembers, that's enough. The ship changed course, engines roaring softly as it vanished into the deep black of space. In the archives of Ardent 9, the story of the humans became more than just a tale. It became a lesson passed through generations. Children read it in schools, elders told it around fires, and travelers carried it to distant stars. And wherever it was told, it brought the same feeling: courage. Because it reminded everyone that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, there was still something bright, something unstoppable. One night, decades after the battle, a young observer on Ardent 9 spotted a faint blue streak moving through the outer system. It was fast, silent, and gone within seconds, but he knew what it was. He ran through the streets shouting, "They're back! The humans are back!" People rushed outside looking up, hearts racing. And though the streak had already vanished, they could feel something in the air, a quiet strength, a warmth that didn't need to be seen to be believed, and so the legend continued. The galaxy had learned many things from humanity: the cost of silence, the strength of unity, and the power of answering a call for help. But most of all, they learned that true strength isn't in domination or fear. It's in compassion, in the simple promise that no cry will go unanswered. On the monument at the base of the beacon, the people of Ardent 9 carved a message in every known language. It read, "They thought no help was coming, but help came thundering from the void. Humanity heard us, and because of them we are alive." Every traveler who saw it felt something stir within, and somewhere in the far distance, through the endless dark, a faint blue light blinked once, twice, before disappearing again into the stars. It was a reminder, a promise. Humanity was still out there, watching, listening, waiting, and when the next call came from another desperate world, somewhere in the galaxy a voice would rise once more from the darkness. "This is the Terran vessel Resolute. Hold on, help is coming."